Violinist Paul Huang received the 2015 Avery Fisher Career Grant and a Lincoln Center Award for Emerging Artists in 2017. The Washington Post says he's an artist with the goods for a significant career, and you can judge that for yourself this Saturday night as he plays Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto with the New Mexico Philharmonic. Welcome.
Hi, it's great to be here, Ren.
Tchaikovsky dedicated this piece to Leopold Auer, who never played it, and then later championed it to his students, including Ephraim Zimbalist and Jascha Heifetz and Misha Elman. What is it about the concerto that either scared him off or that he didn't want to do in the first place?
Well, over the years, obviously the violin techniques has advanced, and so I think back then, when a new piece was being written, one often, gets more scared when there's some eccentric techniques or things that are not super comfy on the violins or things that are unusual back then in the time. People do get scared, and then people first impression was says, "Oh, this is not playable," and especially when the composer is still alive, it's much easier to say that, "Oh, you have to rewrite this." So I think that might be, sort of the case in that sense with the concertos. But obviously today, the Tchaikovsky concerto is considered to be one of the pinnacles of violin repertoire. And everybody plays that piece in schools. It's almost a required concertos for every conservatory violinist to know how to play that piece. So it is true that the violin technique has advanced to today's that, it's possible to play this piece now. Yeah.
One of the great romantic concertos, the Tchaikovsky, I find it interesting in the first movement that he doesn't start with double stops or some big effect for the violin. He plays a theme that never comes back, and then he introduces the theme in the woodwinds, but when the violin enters, it's playing a gorgeous melody.
Yeah. Well, as we all know, Tchaikovsky is such a big ballet composer, which we very often also associate him with not just the symphonic works and chamber music works, but this concerto, especially the first movement, I would think it's so well written. Almost you can almost choreograph that for a ballet numbers. From this beginning, very unassuming string openings, and then when the violin come in with this 7-8 bars of cadenza like ish before the very first melody was introduced, it's almost like opening a curtain. And then in the middle sections, the second theme, the side themes, it's very much a ballet movement. You can dance to those musics for sure, and so I think that's also part of it that speaks to why this piece is so well received to today's, because it is very, you can almost picture the music, not just listening, but you can almost picture the movement of how a ballet dancer would dance to this music. So I think that's a wonderful addition to virtuosity.
And that second movement is not the one that he originally wrote for the concerto.
Yes.
Even he agreed that the second movement he'd written didn't work, so then he put this beautiful piece in.
Yes, because he had the original second movement, I think it was becoming too long, because as we all know, the first movement is almost 20 minutes long. So it's almost going out of proportions of a concertos. So he rewrote this very beautiful canzonetta, very nostalgic and almost Russian folk music, like folk traditions, folk tunes. And it's just a wonderful interplay between the solo violin and also with the orchestra. There are many wonderful duets with the clarinetist, with the flutist, and it's just kind of a very soothing way of coming out from such big, bombastic and virtuosic first movement, which very often people consider that would be the end of the concerto because it's long enough and it's got everything already.
And audiences will often just start to applaud and jump to their feet right after it.
Yeah.
Then the third movement, he almost reverses what he does in the first movement. He starts with the double stops and the fireworks as you'd expect, but then in the middle he pulls out this gorgeous, gorgeous full melody that's played on the G string.
Yeah. Actually, there are two beautiful slow sections in the third movement. One is sort of an interplay between the violin and with the bassoon, and then the second one is, as you mentioned, the one that's very much all on the G strings. So you're going up and down on the G strings, and at the same time trying to make it as melodic, as lyrical as possible without having people notice that you're shifting all the time between notes. And it's just a wonderful, I don't know, it's just such a wonderful mixture of lyricism and virtuosity and fireworks and chamber music making on stage. So it's really a pleasure always when I come back to a piece like this.
What does he gain from the sound of the violin by keeping that melody on the G string, even though it's playing in a higher register?
Well, you get a consistency of the tone as opposed to if you cross strings, because the consistency of the tone on the G strings would allow a long line without breaking the phrase. But if you were to do that on just one position, which means that you will have to cross strings, then you will get inconsistency of sort of the sound, because when you go to D strings, you will obviously have a much brighter sound than the G strings, and then the sound would have less body than a G string would produce on a violin.
So even when you're playing higher on the G string, it's still resonating in the body.
Kind of body of sound, so it's full and round.
Wow, it's going to be a great concert. Saturday, 6 p.m. at Popejoy Hall. Tchaikovsky's Symphony No. 4, and the concert opens with Paul Huang playing Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto. Roberto Minchuk conducts. I'm Brent Stevens. I'll host a pre-concert talk at 5, so you can find out more about the pieces then. Tickets available at any UNM Tickets outlet, 925-5858, or online at nmphil.org. Paul Huang, thank you so much for joining me. Can't wait to hear that Tchaikovsky.
Thank you. It's good to be here.